Welcome to the Ask Junior Daily Judgments podcast. I'm Priya, and joining me today is Raj.
Hello, everyone. We're excited to dive into today's topic, which revolves around a significant recent ruling from the Supreme Court of India regarding income tax reassessments. This case has implications for both the government and taxpayers, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Absolutely, Priya. The case we're discussing today involves the Union of India versus Rajiv Bansal, and it touches on the interplay between several important legislative acts, including the Income Tax Act, the Taxation and Other Laws, Relaxation and Amendment of Certain Provisions Act, or TOLA for short, and the Finance Act of 2021.
So let's break this down for our listeners. The Income Tax Act is essentially the law that governs how income tax is levied and collected in India. It includes provisions for assessing income, determining tax liabilities, and importantly, reassessing income that may have escaped taxation.
Right? And reassessment is a critical function because it allows tax authorities to revisit previous assessments if they believe that income was not fully reported or assessed. This is where the concept of escaping assessment comes into play.
Exactly. And the TOLA was introduced during the pandemic to provide relief by extending deadlines for various tax-related actions. It was a response to the challenges faced by taxpayers during the lockdowns, which made it difficult for many to comply with tax obligations.
And that's a key point, Raj. The pandemic created a unique situation where many taxpayers were unable to meet deadlines due to circumstances beyond their control. TOLA aimed to alleviate some of that pressure by extending time limits for compliance.
Now, the Finance Act of 2021 brought about significant changes to the reassessment process under the Income Tax Act. It introduced a new regime that altered how and when reassessments could be initiated.
Right? And one of the major changes was the reduction of the time limit for issuing reassessment notices from 4 years to 3 years for most cases. This means that if the tax authorities want to reassess income, they have a shorter window to do so.
And for cases where the income that escaped assessment is over 50 lakhs, the time limit extends to 10 years. This is a substantial change from the previous regime, which allowed for longer periods under certain conditions.
So let's talk about the specifics of the case. The Supreme Court had to decide whether the provisions of TOLA applied to reassessment notices issued after the new regime came into effect on April 1st, 2021.
That's right. The court had to consider whether the extensions provided by TOLA could still be invoked for notices issued under the new regime. The revenue argued that TOLA should apply, while the assessors contended that it was only relevant to the old regime.
The court ultimately ruled that TOLA does indeed apply to the Income Tax Act, even after the new regime was introduced. This means that the time limits for issuing reassessment notices could be extended under TOLA, provided the notices fell within the specified time frame.
This ruling is significant because it allows the revenue to issue reassessment notices beyond the standard time limits, as long as they can justify it under the provisions of TOLA.
And it also highlights the court's recognition of the extraordinary circumstances created by the pandemic. The court emphasized that the legislative intent behind TOLA was to provide relief during a time of crisis.
Exactly. And the court also noted that the reassessment notices issued under the old regime between April 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2021 would be treated as show-cause notices under the new regime. This was a clever way to ensure that the reassessment process could continue without starting from scratch.
It's fascinating how the court navigated these complex legal waters. They effectively balanced the interests of the revenue with the rights of the assessors, ensuring that taxpayers were not unfairly penalized due to the pandemic.
And let's not forget the procedural safeguards that were emphasized in this ruling. The court reiterated the importance of obtaining the necessary approvals from specified authorities before issuing reassessment notices. This is crucial to prevent arbitrary actions by tax authorities.
Absolutely. The court made it clear that the requirement for prior approval is a safeguard to protect taxpayers from potential harassment. It ensures that there is a level of oversight in the reassessment process.
Now, as we wrap up our discussion, it's important to highlight the broader implications of this ruling. It sets a precedent for how tax laws can adapt in response to extraordinary circumstances like a pandemic.
And it also reinforces the idea that legislative changes, like those introduced by TOLA and the Finance Act, must be interpreted in a way that serves the public interest, especially during challenging times.
So, to our listeners, this case is a reminder of the dynamic nature of tax law and the importance of staying informed about changes that could affect your financial obligations.
Thank you for joining us today on the Ask Junior Daily Judgments podcast. We hope you found this discussion informative and engaging.
Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning.